Hi everybody. Hi everybody on the Fortis Facebook page. We're here tonight to do a live session all about self-care. So, please feel free to like and comment and share as we're talking, and add in your perspectives as well as we're going along. Jo's here, so she's going to be managing the chat and any questions that come in. I'm Alexis from Fortis, I'm the Managing Director, and I'm joined tonight by Dominic Franks, we've been chatting about food whilst we haven't been live, so that's always a good start. So Dom is the UK's #1 male food blogger. Is that right?
I always think that's such a hysterical title because there's only like 3 blokes that do it. So.
Take it.
I have and I do. Really, the food blogging is something that I do in my spare time, and I run an event production company called The Persuaders with my partner, and we've been doing that for about 21 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's probably longer than that actually, but obviously everything changed at the beginning of March last year. In fact, literally, we had a big pitch for a brand that we've been working with quite a lot, and that afternoon we drove up from London back up to Lincolnshire and have been here ever since.
Oh God. So you really stopped in your tracks from that perspective, because events have just, I mean, we've worked with lots of people who do events or in events, and it's just paused completely, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's completely crazy. We've been really lucky because we've had a few clients who are we've been kind of developing work for them, and that's been really lovely because it's stuff that we can do at home. We don't have to be in London, and we have had a couple of projects which have been really good, but the whole world of events has changed, and social distancing has become this kind of big buzzword of how to cope in the event world. Yeah, it's crazy times, and watching colleagues and other people in the industry kind of crumble, it's been scary.
And that happened, I mean, I remember I was working with an events business the week of the lockdown, and the uncertainty and the ripple effect that was going through everybody, just not knowing, and the worry, and what will it be, and how long will this last for, and what does that mean long term, and and we're a year on now, and
it's hardly any clearer, is it?
No, it's not any clearer, is it? We're within a week before the lockdown and we're a year on, and there's nothing that's really got any different. I mean, I suppose vaccines hopefully will make some difference as we go through, but.
And I had my vaccine yesterday.
Oh yes, I had mine last Friday.
Hey!
Very exciting.
It's very exciting.
Yes, it was like,
I'm really happy about it actually.
Yeah, and I think it's making a difference to just feeling like, okay, we've got a step along the road that's going to help us to get back to something that's going to help us, to feel a bit more normal, if you like.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's a strange feeling because part of me, part of the reason why I get to have my vaccine early is also part of what makes me I'm kind of going round about it in a very unusual way, but getting my autoimmune disease was partly due to the stress of work. So this time, sort of since last March, has almost been the pause that I needed in my life. And that sounds really bad because 100,000 people have died unnecessarily, but in a way it's what I needed. And it felt as though, because it was happening to the whole world, I wasn't ducking out of responsibility. I was kind of making the most of this time to be able to have it to myself, which is almost, it's a weird blessing in a way, isn't it? It's a horrible thing to say in a way, but
yeah. And I think when it first happened, I think a lot of people felt that actually I've got, when we often say I just want to stop the world and get off for a bit, it's like kind of stop the merry-go-round. Yeah. And actually when the world did stop, none of us really knew how to do that or what to do, but I think there was, I mean, I know I definitely felt a bit of a kind of relief that there was an option to pause and to slow down a little bit. And I was traveling all over, and all of that stuff. but it sounds like, you know, you were able to take that pause, and previously to that, when you hadn't been able to do that, that had led you to being physically unwell, hadn't it?
Yeah, completely. So I have an autoimmune called vasculitis, which is, I mean, like all autoimmunes, they don't really know why you get them. Very often they cite stress as one of the reasons, but they don't know. And vasculitis affects my vascular system, so all my blood vessels throughout my whole body. And the way it manifests in me was a pain in all my joints. So every single joint had pain. And when it first started, it was in my feet. And I thought I had just like kind of, you know, that plantar fasciitis that you get.
Oh, yeah.
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 And so I would get up in the morning, the moment I put my feet down on the floor, I was in pain. And then later on in the day, it would be in my knees, and then it would be my hips, and then it would be my elbows. And I just didn't understand what was going on. But it wasn't so bad that I had to stop. It wasn't that bad that I had to stop doing what I was doing. It was just constant and kind of underlying. But eventually it did get really bad. I kind of lived with it for 3 months. And in the end it was just too much. And I was popping painkillers, you know, like crazy. Ibuprofen, which was just messing up with my insides, and I stopped eating and I lost weight, and it was an absolute mess. And eventually went to the hospital. Took them 3 days to diagnose me. They had no idea what it was.
Which is scary in itself, isn't it? 3 days of not knowing, but being in that position of feeling really in pain.
And and like describing pain to people and them not understanding. And it was just, and I've had tests previously because it felt like it was some kind of arthritis, just all the little symptoms that didn't understand. And then on day 2 in the hospital, I got a blood clot in my arm, and that kind of built up a whole bunch of weird things in my mind was playing, you know. And then I don't know if you've ever been in a situation in hospital where, you know, obviously doctors are amazing and the NHS were incredible, but they all almost kind of thrive on you, different things happening to you. So I would have like one doctor coming to me and saying, oh yeah, well, we're going to stick this thing down your, you know, go in your vein here and stick it down and jiggle it around, and if it doesn't work, we'll have to just remove your arm. And you know, and because doctors are so like, they've got some of them have got really bad
bedside manner. Just drop that into conversation.
Yeah, thinking, well, that I'm going to lose an arm, you know, and then and just dealing with all of that is just, it's just been so, yeah, really bizarre. And then eventually they worked out what it was. And
would you have known, did you make the connection at the time that it was stress for you? Did you know you were under that level of stress? Because stress can, I always say that stress comes out physically quite often more than it comes out mentally, because your body starts to tell you that something's wrong before your head does.
Yeah. Yes and no. It is a really stressful industry. And both my partner and I had been thinking for a while about kind of trying to somehow wind down a little bit so that we didn't have to take on so much stress. And also I'd been, for the sort of 2 years previous to that, I'd kind of gone on this massive health kick, and I had been going to do HIIT classes every day and eating well, and kind of like I totally changed my lifestyle. Like I think it was like mid-40s at the time, and it was just like I needed to change my outlook on life, and I completely did that. And then to be sideswiped with something that put me into hospital was a bit of a kind of kick in the teeth, really. It was a bit weird.
I'm making all this effort.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but yeah, I knew that it's very stressful environment. I knew that I was stressed, but there wasn't any time to really think about it. And I'm a really positive person on the whole. I'm really kind of like, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm very much kind of like, oh, I'll deal with that another. I kind of, you know, I just sort of look on the light side of life, and I kind of, so maybe I was ignoring it and I should have seen it more, you know. So yeah, it's difficult to say, really.
Yeah. So when you'd gone into hospital and you got your diagnosis, I'm guessing then they were able to kind of treat you, and you started to recover. Or were you quite poorly for quite a long time?
The hospital takes it out of you anyway. So kind of a month in hospital is then like, 2 or 3 months to kind of get over just that. But yeah, it was a good sort of 6 months really until I was really back on my feet, and I had to have the immunotherapy for vasculitis is quite similar to chemotherapy.
Right.
So you have to go in and you have like infusions every month, and it's quite kind of takes quite a toll on you.
Intense.
Yeah. So it was kind of strange, but I mean, I'm surrounded by really wonderful people. Like I was really lucky because I had 2 separate hospitals. So one of the hospitals happened to be right by my mum's house, so that was kind of really useful. And then when I eventually moved home in London home, the other hospital where my clinician was literally around the corner. So it was kind of, I was very fortunate that people weren't getting on massive journeys to come and see me. It didn't feel like I was hopefully wasn't putting too much strain on people. But then also because I run a business with my partner, he then had to juggle kind of between me and the business that wasn't going to stop. It's kind of hurtling regardless. So that's kind of that was difficult as well. And obviously I don't like just to sit there doing nothing, so I was trying to I'm sure any of my colleagues are watching this, they'll be like, no you didn't.
not a good patient. So when you've kind of gone through that, I guess, is that something you have to manage all the time now? Do you still have to manage that?
Yeah, so I'm on a wonderful cocktail of drugs. And yeah, you know what it's like. You take the drug for your therapy, and then you take the drug to help that drug do its thing, and then you have to take something else to and that's for life. Right. And for the first year I had a monthly clinic checkup where I would go in and have tests, and that's gone down to every 3 months, and it's done by phone as well. So like I said, we've moved up to Lincolnshire, but actually I've kept my clinician in London because obviously he knows me, but also I wouldn't be going into the hospital anyway during this time, so we kind of felt like it made sense. And actually I've been going to the hospital in Louth, and I don't know if you guys know the hospital in Louth, but it's like sort of 1940s shed basically. But they're so brilliant, and they're
brilliant. They're brilliant there.
They are amazing. And I just turn up every 3 months, and they pull up my card, and they take 11 vials of blood, and they send it down to the guy in London, and it's brilliant. So that's kind of really good. But obviously I'm on the clinically extremely vulnerable list, and so it's meant that I've been kind of in lockdown shielding. Although even that is a bit strange because so there's 2 aspects. One is that obviously up until that point, up until sort of end of 2019, I felt like my life was returning to normal. And then we went away, and we were on holiday. We were really fortunate enough to go to LA, and we were in kind of literally walking on the beach in February 2020 and talking about this virus from China, and it was just like, how bizarre that we're going to go back to this. And then obviously everything changed, and then to receive the letter from the government or the NHS saying not only are you in lockdown but you have to shield, I think it would have been a completely different story had I been stuck in London in a place with a teeny little garden and surrounded by buildings and lots of people. And we're really, really fortunate, I have to say, to be in the position that we are, and to be able to come up here to our home here, where we're in the middle of nowhere. We're in the middle of the Wolds, and it's absolutely beautiful, and I can go for a walk for 2 hours and not
see anybody.
Yeah, so that's really fortunate. So for me, shielding is a completely different thing that it is for many people.
How did, because I'm on that list as well, and
well done.
Yeah, thank you. I like to achieve something each year, and that was that for last year. But I know when I got the letter, I was actually I had a real mix of emotions, I think, because it was suddenly feeling like I mean, because I'm asthmatic, so that severe asthmatic, so that's what it was about. But I was suddenly felt like I was being kind of defined by being extremely clinically vulnerable, and I wouldn't consider myself to be that in any other way.
Me either.
Yeah.
Although I knew you must have known it was coming. I mean, I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
You didn't. I knew
Well,
it was coming,
I had to meet the criteria, and I met the criteria, which I was surprised by. Yeah, great.
Yeah, but yeah, because they kept talking about well, the immune system. So that whenever anyone mentioned the immune system, I was like, oh, well, that's me. I've got a compromised immune system. This is going to mess me up.
Yeah.
And actually, the first lockdown, that first month, I mean, I didn't, like many people, I didn't sleep. Every single night that I went to bed, I thought I was going to die. I would lie in bed thinking I'm not going to wake up, and I would lie on one side and breathe, try and breathe, and I in my head I'm not going to wake up in the morning, but I did.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you stop that, because I try and you know, look after myself and be healthy, and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd do my exercises, and I'd cook, which is kind of like the thing that grounds me and centers me, and you know, we would do a bit of work. But every night the same thing, I would lie there and I would think tonight I'm gonna die, I'm not gonna wake up.
I mean, it's so hard to be faced with those fears, isn't it? That, you know, in general life, we just assume we're going to be fine, I think, unless you've got a diagnosis of something that really impacts on you that you've got to manage.
Yeah.
Once it is managed and you're living everyday life, it's a very different thing when you're faced with that, I think. And
yeah, and I think like, and again, so that, I mean, the first lockdown was different because we didn't really know as much as we know now.
No.
And this has been different, except I think I had a bit of PTSD, without trying to minimize that for people who seriously have it. I think that I had a moment a couple of weeks ago where, you know, I think I opened the fire by the fire by mistake, and loads of smoke came into the room, and it really affected my breathing. And I just had this moment where I was like, I can't, I'm going to stop breathing. And then I picture myself back in hospital, and then I actually picture myself dead. It's really, really bizarre. And I realized that I have this, and this is going to sound stupid because I'm assuming everyone fears death. Well, maybe not, but it's that moment of death I fear. It's the sorry if this is getting a bit dark, but it's that moment. I realize it's that moment of like just not being able to finish my life. And that is the unfairness of that. But and I picture it really vividly, like lying on a hospital bed. And I think that's just the PTSD of being in hospital. But you know, like I was saying, I'm kind of like you know, life is half full kind of guy, and so I just, you know, kind of move on from that quite quickly.
It's interesting that though, isn't it? It's almost like your brain injects that at some points. It's almost, you know, like you're living life in a positive way, but there is that fear there. And I think a lot of people will relate to that, especially over the last year. We've been faced with that far more than ever, really. And we've obviously, a lot of people have been affected by people who've been ill, or people who've, you know, very sadly died as a result of COVID or something else over the last year. And we've all been faced with that a lot more than probably ever before, I would say.
Yeah, and it's the stories about people in hospital and the what happens to you when you have COVID and being in bed, and you know, and I don't want to not watch the news, because I think that's really wrong. I think I need to know what's happening, but it goes in, and even if it goes in subconsciously, it goes in and it stays in.
Yeah, and I think it's about being informed, but not looking at those things over and over and over again, because you're right. I think it's that, you know, we're living in it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that, you know, we've worked with over the last year, and including myself, have just been like, I'm not going to engage with it to that level. I think in that first lockdown, it was very hyped, and the media were very much all over it. And it literally, there's nothing you could see or read that didn't have something about it on. And I think there has to be, yes, we know what's going on, but it has to be some self-preservation in there as well, doesn't there, to kind of manage how you respond to it, I think.
Yeah, completely. And I think, like I've never had therapy, and but I kind of have my ways of dealing with stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Or my, yeah. And sometimes I think, am I doing the right thing? But it can, you know, it gets me through. And I know,
And
like I said, I know I'm surrounded by supportive people, and I'm not going to bottle it up. If I really need help, I will reach out. And I'm lucky, I am really fortunate that I have that.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, you're right. We've all got coping mechanisms, haven't we, that help us to get through things, that sometimes they really help and sometimes they're not so helpful, but they're there, and that's what we use. What have you, because obviously we were talking about food and cooking being something that really grounds you. Is that something that's always been the case, or is that something that kind of, I guess you've done more of just as a result of how you've...
Well, yeah, I have done more because I'm here and we have the time. But I've always loved cooking. I've always loved eating.
I'm with you.
And yeah, and my mum is a massive influence on me and food. And we grew up in a household where food was kind of like the center of every kind of big moment in our lives, and that was kind of really important. And she taught me how to cook, or kind of, you know, it's not like she instructed me, but I watched her cook, and she shared recipes with me. And then you know, I would actually bunk off school and stay home and cook, because just, that's really, I know that's a terrible thing to say. So she would go to work, she knows this, I think she might be watching, but she would go to work and I would stay at home and make a complete mess of the kitchen. Then she would come back, and sometimes I would even, and this was like before the internet and before, like, I now do tutorials on Instagram, but I would almost like talk to an imaginary camera and be like, well, what I'm doing next is, you know,
You had your own cookery show. That was what was happening,
yeah,
wasn't it?
totally, yeah. And so that I guess is a form of therapeutic, kind of like doing something you want to do because you're passionate about it. And then you know, kind of fast forward 30 odd years or whatever it is, kind of really at the start of the internet. Well, that makes me sound really old, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember that, Dom.
I don't know if you remember, there's a film called Julie and Julia, which is about Julia Child, and about a woman who cooked from one of her cookbooks every day for, you know, a year or something, a recipe a day. And then she wrote about it in a blog. And I watched that film and I started my blog literally that night.
That inspired you?
Yeah, completely inspired me. And then we have this really amazing kitchen here, and I love cooking in it. And so it was just all about sort of cooking the food that we eat and then photographing and writing about it. And you know, that was like 15 years ago. I mean, or maybe a bit longer. And now I love cooking, but I also I love photography, which is, my photography, I believe, has improved. But I also like doing these tutorials as well, because you know, like, I'm sure that 50% of cooking is about the feedback. It's about people going, oh, that was so nice. And the delivery of that, and what you get back from it, you know, the joy on other people's faces.
I was just thinking, there's a feedback loop there, isn't there? Like you've put all that love and time and attention into what you've created, and then you want some of that back from people. So the feedback, I guess the tutorials help feed that.
Totally. I mean, social media does that. That is the role of social media, is to give you that feedback loop, that kind of, you know, validation of what you're doing. And obviously they can't taste it, so they don't even know if it tastes awful. They just see these brilliant photos, and you know, that's kind of, so yeah. And then there was a time, sort of about 5 or 6 years ago, actually, where work at the Persuaders, the event work, just overtook everything, and the blog and the food took much more of a backseat, and I would maybe do, like, cook once on a weekend and occasionally write about it. But then, yeah, again, this lockdown and this time has brought that out more, and it's now much more of a balance. And I'm beginning to work with some brands, which is really nice. And, you know, it's becoming, although even that, in a way, it starts to take the enjoyment away from it. When it becomes work, I panic, and I'm, oh God, I haven't done this right, and they're going to criticize me, and I've got to fulfill this, and then I'm like, well, what am I doing that for? But, you know, I do still have a mortgage to pay, and
life to pay for.
Yeah.
But I think Joe, have you got a question?
Yes, there's some top fans going on in the group. Charlotte's watching, so
oh dear, there
you go. Matt's asking, Dom, what's better for you, eating or cooking for others?
Yeah, it's hard. That's a really hard one. That is genuinely quite a hard one because I love eating and I have the body fat percentage to prove that. But it's a sort of performance anxiety as well, because that's almost in a way I quite like the Instagram thing because people cannot taste it. So it always looks
pressure's
good.
off though then, isn't it?
Yeah. And my partner is quite critical. Like he will say, no, that doesn't taste good, or it's not, I'm not, you know, it's not for me. But then that same dish has been photographed and everyone's like, oh my God, that looks amazing. And people will say to Andy, oh God, you're so lucky. And he's like, sometimes. So it's half and half. And it's really funny because I'm not like, we never really went out to restaurants. We're not kind of I was never a restaurant blogger or a critic. I'm not that bothered about that kind of food. I like kind of home cooked, you know, kind of like quite ordinary food really. And so I do love eating, and it is a major part of like decisions that are made, you know, holidays, where we go, you know, all that kind of stuff, that all happens. But yeah, I don't think there is, I think it's 50-50.
50-50. That's a cheat. And Matt's also asked, he said, I'm sure it doesn't happen very often, but does it bother you or bring you down when you get bad feedback on social media?
I don't, not to sound arrogant, but I don't really get a huge amount of negative feedback. But I can take as good as I give. Honestly, I have quite an acid tongue. It wouldn't bother me. Matt, that doesn't give you free reign.
He's just going onto his Instagram account.
Yeah.
And of course, Charlotte is asking, can you do a gluten-free recipe for bread for me and her so we can share, please?
No. It's not my fault that you're gluten-free, gluten intolerant.
We should just say to people who are watching that Charlotte is Charlotte Hay from Healing Manor, so that people know who's putting that in the chat.
Also, like, I think there are better people who have struggled in their lives with gluten intolerance that have become cooks and chefs and developed recipes. Go and hunt them out.
You're not the person for that. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, like I don't care enough. Well, also, like, if you were coming round, this is a really good excuse for lockdown. If you're coming round, I'd bother, but sorry.
But you can't, so, you know, let's leave it there.
I do make a lot of gluten-free stuff, actually. I make a mean ground almond and blood orange cake.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's we all need some of that at some point. So you obviously food is obviously something that really helps you. We took, you know, think about self-care and what kind of I always think about that in terms of what puts energy back in the pot, you know, like what helps us to feel more steady. Is there anything else that you do? You talked about photography, you know, it's all very creative, isn't it? All of those things are creative.
Yeah, they kind of all link into each other. Exercise really, and that's not creative at all. That's just about kind of having that moment to like switch the brain off. And I worked out, it's only taken me like 10 years to work this out, but I like to be shouted at by someone. I'm not very good at doing it myself. In terms of, like, I can set myself a routine and I'll kind of stick to it, but actually I found you know, a really good person who is kind of, you know, I've just sort of downloaded a few things and a few workouts, and having someone actually telling me what to do. So my brain is literally concentrating on the workout, and that, I love that. and I never thought I'd be that person. I mean, I hated sports growing up and kind of all that sort of stuff. So, and I love walking, and we live in the most incredible place. So, kind of getting out and sort of being outside. No, I mean, and the cooking takes up a lot of time as well, which in a way is quite good, because I don't really, in the evenings I'll sit down and watch TV, and that's fine. But if I'm bored, or I find myself with a couple of hours, I will sit down and start watching television. 5 minutes in, I'm like up and in the kitchen and cooking something. Just, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. I was just thinking my husband does a similar thing. He's, I think that might be Matt who's asked a couple of questions. Is it Matt? Yeah. So, and food is the thing that he loves to create the food. So, which I'm very happy about, because that's fine with me. And it's funny, actually, because over the years it's kind of swapped around, where I would have been the one doing the cooking, and and I've always done that. And actually, once I kind of get into it, I really enjoy doing it. But it's something that, as a family, I think it's become more and more important. And I think over the last year as well, even more so, just because we've all eaten together every night, and there's part of that routine. You're talking about what you grew up in, and how important that becomes, and who's good at making what, and those I've got 3 children, so we all have there's quite a bit of competition about who makes the best cake or the best cookie or whatever. I mean, it's not good for my waistline. But,
Yeah, I think mum used to, like, cooking a chicken was always like, she would literally shred the thing, because I like this and my brother liked that, and it was just all tricky. But actually, one of the things that Andy recently said to me was that he misses cooking, and because I dominate the kitchen space, he's like, well, actually I'd quite like to do this, and so we're trying to kind of work that balance out as well, because I understand how important it is, and then it's also really important for me to step back, and then there's the whole kind of like, what's he doing in there?
Yeah.
But it's really important, and but I don't get as much, maybe this answers Matt's question, I don't get as much joy as when I'm doing it as when I'm eating it, if that makes sense. Yeah, so maybe there's maybe more 80-20.
Yeah, that's interesting,
maybe.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Joe, have we got any more questions or any more comments or any more banter from Charlotte, basically, is what I'm asking? No?
Loads of banter. You're going to have to go back and read it to have me in hysteric.
Fair enough.
But no more questions for now.
Cool.
No? Okay, so thank you for coming to talk to us. It's been really lovely to talk to you. I was looking forward to it, because I'm quite happy to talk about, I think, I know therapeutically as well, when we're working with children especially, that sometimes cooking can be a really great way of working with someone side by side, just creating something. It's very calming, it's very therapeutic process, and I think you've described it really well as well, and how that's kind of grown for you. So it's been lovely to hear about that. So thank you for coming to talk to us.
Well, it's a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Thank you. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody for now. So thanks to everyone on the Facebook page. Please, carry on commenting, and please share the video, because that would be great. And if it helps anyone, that would be perfect. So thanks very much. See you, everybody.